see one time this man dressed in black every morning, early in the morning. And I asked somebody, I said, why is this man coming every day now? I said, oh, so that's pasta. And I was thinking, oh my goodness, Mulkumut has been hanging around this building all week. Oh, I don't want to get the wrong person.
Exactly. We don't want it to get the wrong person. Malak al-Maut was hanging out here. We don't want it to get the wrong person. All right, you guys. So here we are, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and I'm excited to actually start. The thing is that we didn't announce our starting point, so we are actually ready, inshallah. So for today's tafsir, we're hoping, and that's why I actually started late, because we've got a lot of things to say and a lot of tafsir to do, hopefully, because we actually want to finish as much as we can today because of Arafah and because of the Eid and because of the Hajj. So, subhanAllah, today's ayat, we happen to be in the ayat that relate to Hajj, that relate to Arafah, and it's like, you know, subhanAllah, just came on time. And yep, and here it is. So we just happen to be on time with the topic that is right on. Trust me, if I would have planned it, I would not have been able to do this. All right. I seriously would not have been able to actually plan by the time we're at Hajj time and Arafah time, we would be at ayah 189 to be exact in Surah Al-Baqarah. Absolutely no way that I would be able to calculate my timing like that, especially with me getting off topic most of the times. All right, so we were at ayah 187 last time, but I want you guys to, we're just going to zoom out a little bit so you can see how the pattern is actually going. So when you look at the pattern, we actually started out with the ayah and we said it's kind of like a chapter, in where with this chapter you've got the chapter of ليس البر أن تولوا وجوهكم قبل المشرق والمغرب. So then it's laying out what piety actually means, what being Muslim actually means, and then it laid out the part about faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So think of it and correlate that with Hadith Jibreel, in where when Jibreel alayhi salam came and sat right in front of the Prophet ﷺ and asked him, and tell me about Islam. And then he started answering Islam and tashhadu an la ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. And then he gave him the 5 arkan al-khamsa, arkan al-Islam. And then he asked about فقال فأخبرني عن الإيمان, and then he gives him أن تؤمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله واليوم الآخر. So right there, you know, you could actually see with that same pattern in where it was really laying out. All right, do you guys actually see what I'm looking at? So you could see how it was really laying out right there. So let's just kind of right there, just kind of put some little marks so you guys could see it. So then here is the first part of what it actually means to have bir. What it was basically the faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we've got what does it mean to actually have the faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's basically arkanul iman. So when you look at arkanul Islam and arkanul iman, like the pillars of Islam and the pillars of al-iman, they're actually related to one another. So when you speak about an tashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa anna Muhammad Rasulullah, well, that's not enough to be a Muslim, but there's actually more details, and which is why you could see that right there, the ayah was bringing in arkan al-iman as well. So arkan al-iman to meaning we're talking about the pillars of faith, belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, belief in judgment day, belief in the angels, belief in the books, and belief in the prophets. But then there's a second part, remember? And then تقيم الصلاة وتؤتي الزكاة. So then it actually brought up the second part, which is zakah right there, and of course then it gave you the more details of when we speak about zakah, what does that actually entail? So when we're looking at zakah and giving for the relatives, we talked about those details before, so we're not going to go over it again. And then we're looking at freeing slaves as well. We're looking at the different things, and then iqam salah. Now you could see right there that it's mentioning at zakah, and we were just explaining right there that this is actually part of zakah. Well, here's the thing: is that yes, this is somewhat emphasizing, and especially after saying aqam salah at zakah. So this is actually part of even a higher level than zakah. So zakah, yes, it does actually come in here in those parts of it, but then this is an emphasis in where when you talk about zakah, there are different levels of zakah. There's the general sadaqah, and then you've got the zakah, which is actually that obligatory part of it. All right. Then aqama salah, we talked about that. So now we're looking at, for going further, that yes, there are certain things about what it means to be Muslim, what it means, and then you got iqam salah, you got ita zakah right there, emphasized right there on that part. But then that's not enough, because there are a number of different things. Think of it as a building, in where the main pillars of building, any building, you've got the main four corners. All right, you've got the main pillars, which are the four corners usually, and then depending on how far up you want to go into the building, you want to make sure that you're enhancing those corners. In architecture, they'll always ask on how many stories you're going to go up high. So based on the number of stories that you're going to go up high is really going to determine how much, let's call it, steel enforcement you're going to put on the corners. And that's the same thing, that it's how far up you want to go up high. And that's why then comes in the akhlaq. Because in order to enforce your deen, it's not enough to have those pillars, but you've got, and that's why the Prophet ﷺ actually said that I, like with the rest of the prophets, are actually like a fortress. I'm just a labina. He called himself a labina, which is really like a brick. He said, there was just a labina, there was just a brick that was missing in this fortress, in this huge fortress, this huge castle. And I happened to be that last brick. I happened to be the last brick in that fortress. And then he was basically explaining that I only came in order to complete the beautiful elements of morality. So then it really would emphasize on what it means to actually have morality in order to enhance the main pillars of faith right there. So that's why I went in to speak about that. But of course, it's not enough to actually lay out the foundation of akhlaq, because you also need to ensure when you speak about akhlaq, there has to be law and law enforcement. So it's not enough to actually have laws laid out, but you also need law enforcement in order to enhance how people actually live the akhlaq, and which is where the governance and even the consequence for those that don't want to apply akhlaq actually come in. Are you guys getting too warm? We do have AC. You want us to turn on the AC? No? Yes? Everybody's quiet today. All right. Now the second part, remember, when we're looking at the parts of the patterns in the ayah, then you continue, and then what's after salah and what's after zakah? Well, it's basically siyam. So then it lays out siyam for you. You see that pattern right there? Then it lays out the siyam for you and gives you, since it's talking about siyam, the ayat will go in detail about what are the main details in Siyam. So you've got a number of different days, and then the most important part about Siyam was really the revelation of Quran during Ramadan, and then it goes into connecting that what's important about Siyam is really that connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with dhikr. So don't connect your ibadat only and your pillars only, but always connect yourself with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and with the dhikr. So speaking about Ramadan, then it goes further. And we talked about last week, we actually talked about some of the different details about fasting. And we went in detail about rafath, especially intimacy. And we talked about that. So for those that missed out on last week's class, you can always find it on our YouTube, and then you could, inshallah, even find it on the on the Facebook as well. All right. So then it continues. Well, it's not only eating during the day of Ramadan that is to be eliminated, but then it continues to tell you, listen, don't think that only eating food and drinking is necessarily the wrongdoing during Ramadan, but there's actually something that's really important when it comes to eating. Eating is not only in food and water or drinking and consuming that way, but consumption can actually go farther and can actually mean eating what is not lawful unto you. In other words, you're consuming other people's property. So when we talk about consuming other people's property, we talked about that in terms of the metaphor ta'kulu, and how it's not necessarily you've got a house and you start snatching and starting to gulp up a house, but it's basically speaking about it as if the person is gulping it all up. Now, very important thing that we talked about this ayah, in where that part that even if there was a law that supported you, even if the law that right there is basically supporting your claim, which you know is actually not lawful unto you, it would still be haram, and that does not change the actual ruling. So whether that meant secular law or whether that meant a judge himself actually governing or ruling on your behalf for your benefit, that does not actually make what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had regarded that is not lawful to you, does not change the actual ruling. In other words, when we talk about secular laws, there are many times that people would say, well, you're supposed to be respectful to the law of the land. That many times people would think that the law of the land would change the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's actually very, very common and a very common misunderstanding. The law of the land, if it contradicts the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's laws, Allahu Akbar, are always superior. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's laws are always superior. Yes, let's give an example. Polygamy, all right? Polygamy. Yes, here in the US, polygamy is definitely illegal, no doubt about that. Ironically, it's illegal versus other things are not illegal. Whatever, let's just not go into that area, right? Allahul Musta'an. Yes, other things are legal, but this is not illegal. Or this is, yeah, whatever. Now, not because that the law of the land regards polygamy, as an example, as illegal, that doesn't change the actual ruling of Islam. In other words, if a man were to marry a second wife or a third or a fourth wife, the relationship is halal. Even if I were to tell the second lady or the third lady, hey, I don't recommend it for a number of different reasons. I don't recommend it not to mean that the relationship is haram or zina, but I wouldn't recommend it from the standpoint that you never know how this person might abuse the matter of the fact that this is illegal, and that if you don't have the document to prove your situation, and if you're not really sure, and that many times women end up really becoming victims of a relationship that she has no proof to it except a document that was done in the masjid. And then she would start racing around and trying to prove, hey, you know, this man is supposed to be paying, although that, yes, he will still get child support. It doesn't mean that you won't get child support. All right. But at the end of the day, there's so many different laws, so many different rights she will be missing out on because she doesn't have the legal proof to support it. All right. So that's the only standpoint that I would say, well, you know, I wouldn't recommend it because of the fact that in Islam, the rules are supposed to be backed up even by the government. All right. The rules and the laws are supposed to be backed up by the government. So many women would come to me crying and say, hey, I asked, why doesn't Islam give me this? And I would say, yeah, no, Islam gives you this. She's like, well, they didn't give it to me. I'm like, and how are they going to be supporting you? The imam does not have any power to enforce the law of Islam. So it's not that Islam doesn't give you your right. It's understand the reality that you're living in is that this qadi, this judge, this imam has no power to force the man to come and pay for your alimony or your mahr or, even pay the rent, etc. He can't force him. He can just really advise him. But hey, when a fugitive is actually told an advice and he knows that you have no power to force him to do something, you think he's going to listen? Most likely not. Because to them, oh, your words mean nothing. They're just white noise. They're just white noise. So the women would come to me crying, why doesn't Islam give me rights? It's like, no, it's not that Islam doesn't give you your rights. It's that the imam doesn't have the power to give and force the man to give you your rights. And that's why I always say, hey, I don't recommend it for you. Is it permissible? It's permissible. Is it zina? The answer is no. So what should you do? Well, just laying out the information for you and you decide what you want to do. I can't decide for you. I'm just going to lay out the information for you and you make your own decision. And in other words, you face the consequences. It is what it is. Now, going back to the part about the law of the land, it's not just in polygamy, but it's also different matters as well. Because at the end of the day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's laws and rules are superior to any law. Now, speaking of the law of the land, secularism, all right, when we're looking at secularism, secularism is in itself a religion. Are you with me, Dr. Farhiya? Secularism is a religion, just as atheism is a religion. Atheism is a religion, and secularism is the Sharia of atheism. This is really important to keep in mind, because many times people would think that secularism is not all one, because there are many of secular. It's
sold as neutral.
No, it's basically presented that way. It's presented that way, but it is not neutral. It's presented as neutral, but the matter of the fact is that just when you are, for example, deciding to ostracize faith from ruling, that actually means you did not take a neutral stance. You decided to basically eliminate one. It's not a neutral thing. And that's why, for example, when you look at France, who is always boasting about being so, they call it the laïki, which basically means very secular, eliminated hijab or even religion, and especially hijab and especially Islam from anything in public. That can't be just neutral. No, you took a stance. You ripped those women from their hijabs. You took a stance and and here's the thing, is that when you actually look at any governance, there's no such thing as a neutral governance, not even Islam. There's no such thing as a neutral governance. There's a governance in where it's based on an orbit. You see what I'm saying? Even Islam, it's based on an orbit. That Allah Almighty is superior to any one or any theory in how it lays out ethics, morality, and whatever it is. All right? Even Islam. There's no such thing as a neutral stance. All right? Or let me call it a subjective neutral stance. At the end of the day, is that you're going to have a certain idea regarding morality. You're going to have a certain interpretation of what it means what it means to practice or what it means to practice morality. You're going to have a certain stance on whether it's abortion or whether it's family life or what it means to be and practice justice and how you define justice. There's no such thing as neutral, because at the end of the day is that you've got a line. There's no way that anyone, all right, can necessarily be neutral 100%, because the second that you are neutral 100%, that means you don't have an identity. There's no way. That means you don't have an identity. That means you don't have a boundary. Does secularism have a boundary? Yes, it does. What is the boundary? Religion is not to be included. And nothing will the religion have in any say about morality, about laws, about life, about justice, etc. Is that being neutral? That's not being neutral. That's taking a stance. The second you take a stance, that means you have excluded a group out. Even Islam is not neutral. Even Islam is not neutral. Islam has boundaries too. The second that you want to tolerate every single behavior is that same second that you have lost your own identity. And that's why even in your friends, in your circle of friends, there are certain people that, yes, you need to get out of your area. We talked about that last time, in where there is that orbit, there's that gravity. Every single, even in the smallest atom, even in, you've got from the biggest part of the galaxy, in where you've got a certain gravity, the sun, and you've got those planets orbiting. The same thing, you've got you also see the atom, you've got the electron, you've got the nucleus, you've got the protons. Each one is going to be orbiting in a certain direction. The second that you would see another element coming in to probably get into space, and then you've got another compound, right? In chemistry, you've got another compound. That's when it will start becoming a different substance. And that's the same thing, in where you have to decide your own element. You have to decide your own orbit. Not everyone is necessarily welcome in your orbit, because your orbit is La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. Simple. Your orbit is La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. I can hold some conversations, but only on a condition that my orbit is respected, and the gravity with the way that I lay out the dynamics of my lifestyle, in where it's still going to be circulating around La ilaha illallah. See it right there? La ilaha illallah. Whether you're looking at an outside, all right, whether that's an electric spark or whether that's heat or whatever it is, in chemistry, whatever you have that's going to change your compounds, in Islam, it tells you, wait a minute, your orbit is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why the elements that don't change easily, listen to this, you guys, the elements in chemistry that don't change easily are usually the most expensive, are usually the rarest. The elements that don't change easily. Like what? Like gold. It doesn't change easily. You can expose gold to so many different things, but it doesn't change easily. And what's even harder and more solid, diamonds. And that's why diamonds are basically on that scale. They're actually the most solid. So be a diamond. Be a diamond. What does it mean to actually change in chemistry? It actually means you're losing your own characteristics. That's what it means. Now, what is a characteristic? As a Muslim, your own characteristic is basically supposed to be orbited around La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. So that now your own characteristic is going to be determined not only based on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but your characteristic is going to be holding in that gravity of dhikr and holding in that gravity of who you really are as a Muslim. And as a person that was orbited around that, that's why when you look at whether that external force was environment, or whether that external force was a governance, or whether that external force was your own pleasures, your own self, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to basically tell you how solid are you, how strong are you in maintaining the gravity of your orbit towards La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. Oh, Allah yabarik fik ya. Do you guys understand what I'm, how many people study chemistry or have some clue about chemistry? Like sodium. Yep. NaCl, right? How many people have an idea about chemistry? Come on, you guys. Okay, good. Good. You guys know what I'm talking about? Okay, now you guys are relating your own things with your own life. Why did I actually bring that in? Let's move on with the ayah. يسألونك عن الأهلة. And they ask you about الأهلة. What are الأهلة? الأهلة are basically the crescents. Crescent, you know, the crescent moon, not the pizza, but the crescent. Their pizza, Afghanistan, Afghani people, their pizza is the best. I love it. Right? It is, right? How many people agree with me? That's it. We're marketing that place.
You wake up now.
Exactly. Now you guys are awake. Exactly. There you go. Crescent Moon Pizza. I think it's on 21st on Central Avenue, right? All right. So يسألونك عن الأهلة. They ask you about the crescents. But here's one. There's actually a story behind this ayah. The story is that there were Jews. Mu'adh ibn Jabal used to speak Hebrew. How did he speak Hebrew? Well, Mu'adh ibn Jabal happens to be one of the people that, in other words, a resident of Medina. And because he used to speak Hebrew, they used to have a lot of conversations. Okay. So they would ask him a number of different questions. And part of those questions were, hey, tell us about the crescent. Why does it grow big and then get smaller? You know, we know in science that it's really all about that the sun rays that basically hit the earth and all these different things, you know, basically the moon's surface acts like a mirror. And then depending on the orbit between the sun and the earth is basically going to determine that. That's what they were actually asking about. But the ayah didn't answer that question as how they wanted the question to be answered. Let's see how the ayah answered the question. قُلْ هِيَ مَوَاقِيتُ لِلنَّاسِ. They ask you about the crescents. Tell them that they are مَوَاقِيتُ لِلنَّاسِ, that they are to determine time for people. And الحج. وليس البر بأن تأتوا البيوت من ظهورها. An actual piety is not coming to the rooms and to the houses from the back doors. ولكن البر من اتقى. But piety is actually having البر, which is the bir that was laying out earlier. من اتقى. But piety is actually having taqwa. What does that have to do with anything? وَأْتُوا الْبُيُوتَ مِنْ أَبْوَابِهَا. And when you enter the homes from the doors. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ. And have taqwa so that you would may be successful. Guess what? The interpretation that I gave is very much on the surface. Hold on, we'll explain more detail. I want you guys to remember how much you understand from the ayah, and then see when I would tell you the story and the context of the ayah, how it actually comes out differently. The context of the ayah is, number one, that question that they were trying to challenge the Sahaba and the Prophet ﷺ, hey, what is it? What are the crescents for, etc. But here's the thing. The ayah answered it not directly, like I said earlier, but it actually answered it differently, in where it said they're actually a time zone, but the time zone is really based on the time zone for dhikr. What? Remember how I looked at chemistry? I purposely went into chemistry and talked about the orbits and the galaxies and etc. in order to get to us here. The ayah was talking about the crescent, but the question was not relating to how we relate to it. The ayah, the question was talking about the physics, astrophysics of crescents and moons and all the orbits of space and galaxies. But the ayah said, I'll let you figure that out later on your own, how things function, and the story about diseases and the stories about galaxies and astrophysics and gravity. That's for you to study on your own. But what matters is how you see that as an orbit in your life. The orbit is dhikr. So when you see the moon, you see the stars, you see the atoms, you see the orbits and all the different things and elements in chemistry and animals, etc. You recognize that you see the pattern, that the pattern is one, and that the pattern should be with your focal point in where it's based on al-hajj. It's based on al-dhikr, not hajj, but dhikr. So the ayah here is telling you and emphasizing that you see the moons right there, you see the crescent right there. Well, connect your orbits of time and place, that it should always be based on the main center of gravity, which is La ilaha illallah. So what does that mean? So let's say you wanted to move to a different state. The first thing that you want to look for is probably the nearest masjid, probably the nearest Islamic school, probably the nearest Muslim society. Why? Because you want to make sure that you are surrounding yourself and building the main gravity that keeps your orbit intact. See it? And that's the same thing in where space, that is place, and time, you must always think of the gravity and the orbit that is مواقيت للناس والحج. Even though a miqat is supposed to be a timing, but in Hajj, al-miqat is actually a place. But when we look at different miqat, Bar Ali or Al-Juhfa, etc., those are different miqats. But the miqat here is telling you that even if you may consider a miqat as a time, al-miqat can also have a location. Same thing. What connects a place and a time together is usually people. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you right there that you connect it by creating those orbits. You connect them by dhikr. So when you study at school, you study probably geography, you study, let's say, health or whatever it is, always connect yourself. How am I going to support the cause of Islam in my field? How am I going to maintain my Islam in my field? If I can't maintain my Islam in that field, find another field. But I love the field. But wait a minute, if you cannot maintain your Islam in that field, maintaining your Islam is the core and the orbit that you should be concerned about. That girl has a nice personality, but if she is getting you out of your orbit, don't get her into your orbit, because your orbit to be with around that nucleus of La ilaha illallah is basically your number one priority to maintain your main characteristics, your main identity as a Muslim. You see what I'm talking about? Your main identity as a Muslim. And that's why when you see gases and you look at gases, liquid, and what? And solids, right? Come on, you guys, are you awake? What's going on?
Usually go the other way around. Solid, liquid, gas.
Right, but I wanted to actually get to the gases.
Yeah.
I wanted to get to the exactly usually solid, liquid, gas, but I wanted to get to the gas first because of the fact that gases tend to be the easiest ones to connect with other elements. Why? Because the gases, they don't keep their orbits as much as the solids do. Are you guys with me here? They don't keep their orbits as much. They change fast. Why? Because they're fluid more. And that's the same thing. The more fluid you are, the more likely you are to lose your characteristics. The more fluid you are, the easier for you to lose your characteristics. In other words, maintaining your personality, whether in raising your children or whether in yourself in being at school, you have to be solid. There are certain things that you got to be solid in order to maintain your characteristics as Islam. But if you're going to be tolerant of everything, by the time you know it, your characteristics are gone. You're going to find many that are trying to pressure you. That's the most thing that changes every chemical, whether through heat or whether it's through pressure or whether it's basically banging on it. And usually the solids are the ones that will be banged on. They will try to change you, but you got to be solid. Don't be fluidy and get lost with your identity. And don't be gassy in the literal meaning, all right? And don't be gassy and let whatever you see around you, you just hook onto it and you just absorb it. Now you have to maintain a characteristic. You have to maintain a solid foundation and you have to maintain a solid identity of who you are. Because if you're easily going to absorb every single thing about everyone around you, you're going to be losing your nucleus. You're going to be losing your orbit. You're going to be lost. You're going to be tolerating everything. You're going to be lost. Let's continue. وليس البر بأن تأتوا البيوت من ظهورها. And bir. What is البر? وليس البر. Sorry. What now in the first ayah ليس البر in the previous ayah, but this time it said ليس البر. What is that? And why is it telling us that? Let's just look at this one. البر, which is piety, which is the highest level of how good you can be. It's not about coming from the doors and the houses from the back. What does that have to do with anything? Here's the story. Is that the people of Quraysh, they actually used to have a ritual. Is that the ritual included that if somebody is not a resident of Mecca, that they should be the ones to enter the room, the house, Mecca, or even their homes from the doors. From the back of the doors. Yet if they are residents, then they would be the only ones to enter the door from the front door. So they would have a back door and they would have a front door. So why the people that are not residents of Mecca actually come from the back door? It's like they are filthy. They needed to get some purification. So they need to come from the back door. But the ayah was actually mentioning that, and they were called al-Hums, by the way. Al-Hums were basically the residents of Mecca. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, it's not about how you might actually make a narrative and create a narrative to what it means to be pious, but it's actually وَلَكِنَّ الْبِرَّ مَنِ اتَّقَى. True bir, true piety is how you maintain taqwa, how you maintain your nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. what is that relating to? Well, this is talking about don't create a narrative to the wronghood you're doing. Don't create a narrative to the wronghood you're doing and think of it as some form of, I'm strict about the narrative. I'm strict about coming from the back door just so that I would seem somehow pious and living up my principle. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, bir in principle is really not based on the narrative that you create and not based on what people had invented in terms of culture and ritual, but piety and principle is based on nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In other words, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that determines principle and not people. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In other words, remember the nucleus. In other words, when you look at taqwa, maintaining that gravity, maintaining that relationship between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is the real principle. That is the piety. And it's not how people would create a narrative to make it seem that it's all about coming from the back door, or it's all about, like, take a look at, for example, right now, it's all about being inclusive. All right. And you dare not accept this inclusivity that is right now put and shoved into your throat. You are somehow, and here's the thing, is that a lot of the younger girls would really feel like if I don't accept and tolerate that behavior, then I might actually hurt people's feelings. I'm going to turn on the AC because I think you guys are starting to get warm. Am I right? Yes? Okay. Now you guys can feel home. I know, I can see. I can see a little bit of, she's starting to get shiny. I was like, okay. I can see it starting to get shiny, and I can see some people are like, okay, this is getting warm. All right. I hope it's not that that's getting too warm. Okay, good. Alhamdulillah. ولكن البر من اتقى. Now I want you to look at here in where, remember that inclusivity, all right? You will be, and you can see it that many times, girls at school or at work, you're being asked to be inclusive. In other words, you're asked to tolerate that behavior. And the second that you actually say that we don't tolerate that behavior, then you're being accused of somehow spreading hate, homophobic, etc. And of course comes in that dichotomy, the dichotomy in where if you say you don't tolerate that behavior, that they will put in a dichotomy that means you want to attack, even though you didn't even say anything about attacking. You just said, I don't tolerate this behavior. I don't consider that that behavior is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created nature to function in. And therefore, we don't actually consider that it is something I should be supporting. But then here's the thing, is that many girls and many students will be afraid to actually speak up and say, we don't accept and we don't tolerate such behavior because of the dichotomy that is actually used at many times, in where you will then be accused of being homophobic, you will then be accused of spreading hate, you will then be accused of not accepting other people, and that you will be a threat to people's lifestyles, and you will be a threat. So what should I say? How do I actually fix this? Say what Islam says openly. Don't be afraid. You have to lay out. You have to lay out not necessarily just the boundaries, but you also have to speak the Islamic narrative in that space. Don't be afraid to speak your identity. Don't be afraid to actually say what truth is. The second that you actually start tolerating each and every single behavior and tolerating each and every single action because you need to seem inclusive and tolerant, that's the same second that you had actually lost your identity. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you, وَلَكِنَّ الْبِرَّ مَنِ اتَّقَى. True bir, true piety is not based on the narrative that they might create, but true piety is based on how the orbit that you create and how you relate with the nucleus of La ilaha illallah. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that determines the speed and the velocity of things and how fast and how you should approach and where to go and what is right, what is justice, what is moral, what is illicit, what is immoral. And He's the one that determines the main legal maxims. The main legal maxims, DNAIM, that preservation of people's vision in their deen, the preservation of people's lives, the preservation of people's minds, the preservation of family. And again, the preservation of family is sacred. The preservation of wealth, how the income is coming in and how the money is distributed is all sacred in order to maintain justice and in order to maintain security and maintain happiness. It's not about making a narrative, but it's actually to be determined by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because He is the one that created the world. Now to continue, وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ. And in order to gain and in order to reach the level of falah. What is falah? The word falah actually means success. But the word success and falah can actually go farther than just talking about it in akhirah. So it's not my goal, yes, is Jannah, but it's not just Jannah. It's also stability, happiness, even in this dunya. And that's why the Salihin used to say, if you didn't get to your Jannah in dunya, you're never going to get to your Jannah in akhirah. You didn't get to your Jannah in dunya, you're not going to get to your Jannah in akhirah. But the Jannah in dunya is not the money. It's not the money. And it's certainly not all the fancy things that people are looking for. To people, that's Jannah. But the true Jannah that Islam and the Salihin were talking about is really that Jannah. And where on the inside, you're living the stability, you're living the power, you're living that moment of hope, you're living the happiness. How am I going to live the happiness if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually said, the Prophet actually says, in Allah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if He loves a believer, He'll test him. This is the Jannah you're talking about. How is that going with and congruent with what you're talking about? Here's the thing, is that that's where, when you look at, let's go back to that ayah, in where قُلْ هِيَ مَوَاقِيتُ لِلنَّاسِ, even though they were actually asking about the moons, it's really redirecting your vision, redirecting the way you see things, from looking at the matters in their materialistic cause and effect type of a pattern to going beyond that cause and effect and seeing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that controls the different matters of space, place, time, environment, all the different things that surround you. In other words, when you see the world and everything going in the way that it is, instead of you seeing the calamity, my son is dead, my uncle died, my mother, whatever it is gone, then you would see, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive them. I know that this is a moment that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is testing me, testing them, and that in the loss, I see in it, I start changing my vision to seeing gain, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to give me something in compensation, is going to give me other than this. Now what do I see? Instead of seeing loss, to seeing gain. Instead of looking at pain, to seeing gain. That Allah, how will I see the gain? It's redirecting your vision by seeing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that controls the matters that surround you. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala controls the matters that surround you, then you will redefine, you will re-see the different elements that you see in life, and you will start seeing them from a different orbit. You start seeing them. The Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that controls the matters. So then, instead of seeing pain, you're seeing gain. Instead of seeing your loss or your weakness, into seeing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that has the power. So that's where dhikr comes in. Dhikr, if you're feeling the weakness, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Don't look at your weakness. Remember, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that controls the power. The second that you need love and you're missing out on it, Ya Hannanu, Ya Mannan, you're calling on to the Lord Almighty, the most affectionate, the one to give all the one to give all the mercy. You're losing out on it. When you're seeing yourself that you had lost a rizq, you're saying, Ya Razzaq, you're the one that controls the rizq. When you're seeing yourself that you had fell into an illness, you're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, oh Lord Almighty, Anta Shafi. Allahumma Anta Shafi. La shifa illa shifa'ak. There's no cure, but you are the one that gives cure. Ishfini shifa'an la yughadiru saqama. Give me a shifa. Give me a cure that will not leave any illness behind. Why? Because your doctor can give you a cure or a medication, but the medication will probably have side effects that you may not know now. You may not know now, or can have other side effects. It's probably curing you from one side, but then the side effects is basically hitting on your kidney, on your liver, or who knows what, and that's why they have to keep on doing all these tests to make sure that, yeah, I give you this medication, but the medication is going to have another targets elsewhere. It's like it's curing, but then all right. وَقَاتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ الَّذِينَ يُقَاتِلُونَكُمْ, and fight in the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now the word sabil actually means path. الَّذِينَ يُقَاتِلُونَكُمْ, those that fight you and do not commit any transgression. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُحِبُّ الْمُعْتَدِينَ, for the Lord Almighty does not love those that start out a fight, that transgress. What does that have to do with this whole thing? How did we get into jihad now? Here's the story behind this. So when the Prophet ﷺ, all right, he had seen a dream. The dream is that he saw in the dream that they were actually going to Mecca. Some of them were shaved and some of them had short hair, and they were actually going to Mecca. So the Prophet ﷺ ordered them to prepare that they're going for Umrah. Now the Sahaba are, here we go, we're going for Umrah. They get their animals along with them for slaughtering. They prepare themselves, and here they are, they're going to Mecca. In the middle of the road, the Prophet ﷺ, just so that the people of the Mecca, the people of Quraysh, are not provoked by the presence of the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet ﷺ sends Uthman bin Affan. Uthman bin Affan is sent in order to basically be the delegate and explain to the people of Quraysh, we're here not for any provocative move, we're here just to make Umrah peacefully, and that's it. Now, the people of Quraysh, they basically wanted to seize the moment. What was that moment? Well, here it is. The Muslims, they're coming in, and they had no whatsoever any preparation for war. We could probably provoke them and probably make them somehow get into a war while they're not prepared, and we can eliminate them entirely and defeat them. So what they did was they actually kept Uthman bin Affan, and they spread rumors that Uthman bin Affan was killed. Why? In order to provoke the Prophet ﷺ to consider waging a war, even though they had no arms, they had no weaponry whatsoever ready for any battle. But that's really exactly what Quraysh wanted. So by spreading that rumor, the Prophet ﷺ still had to be ready even for this provocative move. So what the Prophet ﷺ did is that then the Prophet ﷺ prepared and then asked the Sahaba to prepare for bay'ah. What is a bay'ah? Well, bay'ah is actually an official move, an official, you could consider it giving solidarity, but not solidarity in terms of, yeah, I'm just solidating with you, but that's actually speaking in a more of a military type of a solidation, in where you are saying, I will be ready. I will put my life at stake regardless of what the consequence is. I am here supporting you, Ya Rasulullah. So they came in, did that bay'ah to support the Prophet ﷺ. I'm here, no matter what the consequence is, I'm going to be supporting the Prophet ﷺ. The Quraysh was seeing this. And to them, that's exactly what they wanted. So they actually sent a couple horsemen. Those horsemen were actually supposed to be doing what? Provoking the people of Quraysh, the Muslims. These horsemen started doing what they can, just like in the movie Risala, you guys see it, in where there's the Khalid ibn al-Walid coming in with this horse and trying to provoke the Sahaba, and specifically in the movie they brought it like he's provoking Bilal ibn Rabah, and he just said peace. You might remember the part in the movie Risala? Long time ago. Okay, there you go, long time ago. All right. But by the way, I actually have a commentary just on the movie Risala. We keep on pausing it and actually comment on where it's authentic and which part of it is not authentic, which part of it is missing certain elements, and which part of it was accurate. So look at it. Anyhow, so then the Prophet ﷺ, after ordering them to do that bay'ah, the Prophet ﷺ gets a number of delegates. The Prophet ﷺ told them, calm. Don't get provoked. Then a number of delegates from the people of Quraysh, they come in. These delegates were here in order to make an agreement. What is the agreement about? First one didn't work out. Second one, I'm making the story short, didn't work out. Third one didn't work out. Fourth one, all right, the fourth one, third or fourth one, all right, comes in Suhail ibn Amr. Now, Suhail ibn Amr was very known to be an eloquent man. In fact, Suhail ibn Amr had proposed for Hind bint Utbah, Abu Sufyan's wife, before Abu Sufyan had proposed for her. Suhail ibn Amr comes, and the Prophet ﷺ, when Suhail ibn Amr comes in, when Suhail ibn Amr comes in, the Prophet ﷺ said, Sahula amrukum, it's going to be at ease now. Suhail ibn Amr reads the document that the Prophet ﷺ had ordered that would be written. And what was it? From Muhammad Rasulullah to the people of Quraysh. Suhail, we ain't gonna be accepting that. Erase it. The Sahaba are provoked with this move. They're already, it's like, wait a minute, you were just here, just trying to cause some trouble. So the Prophet ﷺ tells Ali ibn Abi Talib, erase it. Now, does that mean that the Prophet ﷺ negated that he was a Rasulullah? No. It was for the sake of that agreement. Erase it and write what he wants. And he writes. Now, that agreement contained a number of different elements. Number one is that the Muslims would actually not perform. Is it good? Is it cold? Yes. Okay, good. That the Muslims would not do Umrah that year and would actually come back the following year. In other words, that the Muslims, all their readiness to go for Umrah and or not driving, but literally walking almost 400 kilometers when they were just a couple miles away, they're still not going to go to Mecca. You're going to go back 400 kilometers on foot. And to them, to a lot of Sahaba, what is this? This is total humility. They're humiliating us. And we would accept such a humiliation that they would not go back. They would just go back and come back the following year and do Umrah and come back, in other words, in and out in just a matter of 3 days. So they'd be walking almost 450 kilometers and just for 3 days. See that? And not only that, but that if any Muslim were to attack any of the Quraysh alliances, that this would be the end of the agreement. Same thing, if any Qurayshis would attack any of the Muslims, that's the end of the agreement. But there's one even more provocative. Look at this one. If anybody were to convert to Islam from the people of Mecca, they are to be returned by the Prophet ﷺ to go back to Mecca. Oh my God. And guess what happened? The Prophet ﷺ signed it. The Sahaba were not, I don't want to use the word angry, but they felt that it was nothing but defeat. But then the ayah was revealed. Inna fatahna laka fathan mubina. This is a major victory. Major victory. What are we talking about here? Now, forgot to mention a very important story. Suhail ibn Amr, he signs the contract. The Prophet ﷺ, they sign the contract. Suhail ibn Amr leaves. And who comes in? Abu Basir. He comes in, or is it Abu Jandal? Comes in, and then what does he do? He's like, Ya Rasulullah, I just became Muslim, and these people, my dad, who's his dad? Suhail himself. They're torturing me, they're putting me in a great fitna, help me. But the Prophet ﷺ can't help you, we just signed the agreement just now. This is Suhail ibn Amr's son. So right there, Suhail ibn Amr, bang, slaps him right in front of all the Muslims. Right there. They can definitely do something about it. But the Prophet ﷺ said, no, we can't. Because for a prophet, even he doesn't commit. Even betrayal with an eye, he would not do. They said, just give us a blink to kill him, and we would do it. So he said, a prophet does not even betray, not even with a blink. Not even with a blink. Later, not only that, but later, a 17, almost a teenage girl, basically, her name is Kulthum. She basically becomes Muslim. And she runs away, and her father was Utbah. And Utbah happens to be one of the major chieftains of Quraysh, kind of like Abu Jahl, Abu al-Hakam. You know, he happens to be one of the richest men, one of those big guys. All right. His daughter becomes Muslim. And what does she do? And she's only a teenager. She runs to Medina. And then Utbah sends two of her brothers, two of his sons, that is, in order to fetch her, go get her. How dare she becomes Muslim? Get her, we're going to teach her a lesson. So that's when the Prophet ﷺ, he basically says, sorry, I can't help you. You got to go back with them. And she said, there cannot be something that you could expose us to, because as women, we're weaker than men. They can take advantage of our physical weakness and actually make us become kafir again. And later the ayah that إذا جاءك المؤمنات مؤمنات إذا جاءك المؤمنات what is that فامتحنوهن الله أعلم بإيمانهن إذا جاءك المؤمنات مهاجرات فامتحنوهن. If the believing women come to you, فامتحنوهن مهاجرات, they come to you migrating, then test them. الله أعلم بإيمانهن. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most one that knows about their faith. So test them, ask them, By Allah, did you only come for faith and not because you wanted to marry a guy that you liked in Medina or something, that you only came for faith? He said, that's all you need to, that's all you need to confess it. Yes. And then that was putting that exception that women are not included in the agreement. They can't be included in the agreement. Abu Jandal and Abu Basir later, Abu Basir comes in and what happened? He comes in and the Prophet ﷺ said, well, I can't do anything to you. He comes in, help me. And two guys come in from Quraysh. They were like, yeah, we've got one of the guys from Quraysh. So he basically became Muslim, want you to give him back to us. And the Prophet ﷺ tells him, Mis'aru harb. Mis'aru harb. Like he could by himself wage a war if only he had men. In other words, you guys do your own guerrilla wars. He was telling, it's like giving you a hint. You help yourself. And then he created his own game group, if you'd want to say, to protect those that couldn't have a safe protection from the Muslims in Medina. So they would have their own group. They would make their own group, those that had become Muslim, make their own group. And then they would wage the war, guerrilla wars on people of Quraysh. So eventually Quraysh gave up on that condition. So then Khalid ibn al-Walid, Amr ibn al-As, Talha, they went in Medina. Now, this ayah right there, because of the context, this ayah was actually in the context of, this ayah was actually in the context of Medina and of course, but then the context of also during pretty much the same period, the same timing period of Hudaybiyah. All right, Hudaybiyah. That was called the Hudaybiyah time when Suhail ibn Amr comes and makes that agreement. Are you guys with me here? Are you guys lost now? Okay, good. So this ayah right there, وَقَاتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ الَّذِينَ يُقَاتِلُونَكُمْ. All right. So this ayah right there, قَاتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ الَّذِينَ يُقَاتِلُونَكُمْ, was the first ayah to be revealed and given the permission to fight. Yes, some scholars also said that the ayah in Surah Al-Hajj, أُذِنَ لِلَّذِينَ يُقَاتَلُونَ بِأَنَّهُمْ ظُلِمُوا وَإِنَّ اللَّهَ عَلَى نَصْرِهِمْ لَقَدِيرٌ. Some scholars said it was that one, but they pretty much the same meaning. I'll explain both of them. So this ayah, and fight for those, or fight for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In other words, you're not fighting for the sake of wealth and getting money. Those that fight you, in other words, it's basically specific. If someone is attacking you, well, don't attack others. Don't start an attack. Don't be amongst the transgressors, and defend yourself. It's all about the jihad of defense here. Here's the question. Let's go move on and see, is jihad always jihad in defense, or can it be in other types of jihad? So that's basically what we're going to look at it. وَاقْتُلُوهُمْ حَيْثُ ثَقِفْتُمُوهُمْ. This was also during the time of Hudaybiyah. I'm going to read the surface of it and then I'm going to explain it, because this ayah happens to be one of the main targeted ayat in the Quran. The Fox News ayah, exactly. The Fox News ayah. Let's see what it says. Ready, you guys? The Fox News ayah, exactly. Look, it's telling you that it's all about killing and all these different things, right? And then you've got, oh man, they just love it. Okay, let's see and explain it. I'm going to read you how Fox News would read it, okay? And slay them. This is how they would read it. And I'm going to explain to you what that, okay? I'm going to read to you how Fox News would read it, and then you're going to see that gradual interpretation of what they're really not reading right. The Fox News explanation: and slay them wherever you may find them, and then stop. They would stop right there. This is it. And then they would quote, all right? They would quote Surah Baqarah, verse 191. All right. Or chapter 2, verse 191. They would only read, and slay them wherever you may find them. That's it. They're going to kill you. And then, by the way, you guys, I was actually invited to speak at in CNN. All right. And the lady that was corresponding with me, she basically said, I've noticed that you wear different colors. I said, yeah, I wear different colors. And she said, well, just for the lights and cameras, can you actually come wearing black? I said, I normally don't wear black, but I just said, certainly. So I said, what about the other colors? She said, the other colors don't actually appear well on camera. I said, okay. So I go and I actually go wearing red. Literally red. Wallahi red. Niqab black, red, clothes red. I was just in red. I'd even posed for that picture. And just when it was just my turn to actually go live, they were counting down 10, 9. And when they got to 7, they were like, cut, 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 cut. I was hearing them. And by the way, the professional talk that you would hear on TV is totally different when you actually meet them. They have no good words whatsoever. They have no professionalism. It is disgusting. So like, cut, cut, cut. I could hear them. And I could hear them. And then they started using bad words. It's like, we can't have her appear like that on camera. And I'm just right there. I'm like, they were like, so what should we do? They were like, continue the program, and we're going to basically put a commercial. And put a commercial. And then they were like, why is she dressed like that? And I could hear them. And then they started, F words and all these different things and stuff. Not to me, but it was about me. This is the neutral media of CNN. Only on CNN. Well, it's actually on all of them, but yeah. This is real. This is real. If only, I had the complete recording for you to actually see it. But of course, they won't actually allow that because it would really make big news on media. And that's the same thing. Anywhere the media will actually put a certain portrayal, and they'll actually eliminate certain words on purpose. Let's continue the ayah and say, so the word says, waqtuluhum, and fight them, not kill them. Because the word qatl can mean to kill and can mean to fight, and can also mean to object. Okay, so here waqtuluhum is not necessarily mean to kill. It can also mean to fight. حيث ثقفتموهم, where ثقفتموهم. The word ثقف, which is the root, actually means wherever they are, kind of like based in, kind of like military bases. So this is basically talking about where they have strong bases in. So this is not wherever you meet them. This is not, you see somebody walking down the street going to Aldi. You're like, you know what? I'm going to kill you, bro. That's not what it means. This is talking about military bases. This is talking about power that is the opposing power to basically attack the Muslims. Those areas of force that were there stationed in order to attack the Muslims, in order to cause the transgression, in order to basically stop the da'wah, or basically cause harm to the Muslims, is basically what you want to target. So this is basically what it's talking about. It's basically those stationed areas where they're basically attacking the Muslims in. And that's exactly what that ayah was talking about. That ayah was talking about the people of Quraysh. What's the evidence of people of Quraysh? And get them out and expel them from where they have expelled you. Who is this talking about? We're talking about the people of Quraysh. They got you out of Mecca. Get them out of Mecca. Well, let's continue and actually see. وَالْفِتْنَةُ أَشَدُّ مِنَ الْقَتْلِ. Why al-fitna? Al-fitna can mean the fitna of dunya, can mean anything that gets you off your path. That's a fitna. All right. Fitna can also mean battle. Fitna can also mean killing. Fitna can also mean heat. But this ayah right there, الفتنة أشد من القتل, that fitna, which is basically kufr. So kufr and getting Muslims outside and expelling them outside of their, basically out of their homes, is even worse than fighting. In other words, protect your rights. Protecting your rights, even if it meant to protect your rights. And of course, it depends. I'm not talking about, oh, he took my lollipop, I'm going to go kill him because I'm protecting my right in the lollipop. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the rights of deen, nafs, aql, ird, man. So when you look at, well, why would Islam actually consider for zina, for example, for zina, that a justified punishment to be a corporal punishment? All right. So we would say al-fitnatu ashaddu min al-qatl. So for a corporal punishment, yes, that is harmful. Yes, harming the body is definitely supposed to be something major, but making sure that the family and family security and stability, and because family is sacred within the society, we will basically have to deal with the individuals, because the community at large and their sacred community and sacred family processing is a lot more sacred than the individual's freedom. You see what I'm saying? So, وَالْفِتْنَةُ أَشَدُّ. لا مش كويس. والفتنة أشد من القتل. هي بكيس Walmart. والفتنة أشد من القتل. So that's basically in order to draw the line. In other words, don't fall for the narrative when they're basically telling you corporal punishment and killing and all that. Well, just like even in all the countries, they'll basically have police officers, law enforcement. Do you think the police officers are carrying flowers with them? Or gift cards? What are they carrying? What are police officers carrying? Come on, you guys. Guns, okay. Handcuffs, what else? Bombs, grenades, right? Pepper spray, tasers, right? And all those things are what? To inflict pain. Isn't that corporal punishment? Right? Why would police officers actually carry those? Why can't they just carry flowers, nice perfume instead of pepper spray, right? Right? And instead of guns, probably carry, what is that? Making parties. There's no way. Because simply they too believe in the word al-fitnatu ashaddu min al-qatl. Right? Because they too believe that the insecurity, the instability that might actually happen within the society is worse than al-qatl itself, even if that meant killing one person. If it means eliminating fitna from the society, they'll consider it as totally justifiable. They'll consider it as, well, we just have to do it. You see what I'm saying? And they're actually practicing al-fitnatu ashaddu min al-qatl. That al-fitna. Now here al-fitna is basically kufr. So getting the people outside of their Islam, getting the people exposed into fitna by preventing them from having the freedom to practice their faith, is even a bigger harm than battle itself or going into war. وَلَا تُقَاتِلُوهُمْ عِنْدَ الْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامِ. And that basically tells you that this ayah that is taken out of context, let's continue the ayah, is basically an ayah that was revealed during the time of Hudaybiyah. Let's continue it. وَلَا تُقَاتِلُوهُمْ. And don't kill them or fight them near al-Masjid al-Haram. What is al-Masjid al-Haram? The Kaaba. Until or unless they fight you in it. And if they fight you in it, well, fight them back. This would be the consequence for those that disbelieved. What is that telling us? That, hey, when you go inside Mecca, and if they fight you there, don't just sit there. Protect yourself. Right? If somebody is there pulling your hijab off, don't be sitting there and just crying. Fight for your rights. Do what it takes to protect yourself. Do what it takes to make sure that no one is transgressing the limits with you. See what I'm saying? Now, this ayah, many times taken out of context, we needed to explain the historical context to it, and of course, the wording for it. Any questions regarding that ayah? No? All right, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you guys, because I could see many of you are fasting, we're going to give you a 10-minute break. How about that? I think it's a good idea. Right? Right? Because until iftar, we've got some time. You what? You lost your thought? You were gone? Okay. It's recorded. It's recorded. It's recorded. That's all right. So we're going to pause. We're going to stop the live stream. We're going to come back, inshallah, in 10 minutes. All right, inshallah.